I'm Maddie Sloane and welcome to Snap Happy, the photography show. In today's episode, we'll be bringing you some great tips for capturing stunning seascapes. But first, we join Darran Leal for an adventure through one of his favourite landscapes in the world.
Our next leg of the journey takes us off the Gibb River Road, through some rough country, crossing creeks and traversing rocky hillsides. Our destination, Pulu National Park, home of the Bungle Bungles. One of the reasons you would want to come to Pulu National Park is because it's such an iconic landscape location. I rate it in the top handful of landscapes in the world. The domes are just so incredible. I find any time of the day, photographic opportunities are available. You just need to have an open mind. We've arrived early to Pickaninny Creek. I want to get the group in really before that light is too bright and too contrasty, and we get the first glows, those beautiful first colours that can really make a difference to photography. The benefits of coming to a beautiful landscape very early in the morning is for the possibility of unique light. Before the sun comes up, I get my group down to a pre-researched location, in this case, Reflections and the Bungle Bungles. We are using aperture priority. Because we are hand holding, we'll up the ISO and use f8, this giving us about a 30th of a second. This is quite hand holdable with our image stabilisation technology. We also flip our screens so we can get very low and emphasise the reflections in the water. You wait till you see the results. Really, really cool.
Coming in and seeing those iconic beehives, it's just wow. Pulu has certainly been on our radar for a long time.
I'm always looking out for different places and angles to take a photograph. And in this case, I found this little scoured out rock hole here. So my aim here is to frame up the photograph using these holes as like a canyon type effect, and then exposing correctly for the domes in the background. I am using aperture priority and I am changing my exposure, my EV override. I'm using that to minus 1.3 stops, but you could shoot manual as well. We've got a really cute little subject here. It's a little rock dragon. I'm using my 100 to 400 millimeter lens. I can actually use it nearly like a macro lens. Really simple settings. I've actually changed to aperture priority F11 this time. I want a little bit more depth of field. 400 ISO, I'm getting about 400th of a second shutter speed that's easily hand holdable. We're all here getting some great shots. It's the greatest model I've ever seen for a dragon. I'm going to get some more photos myself.
The shaping of those beehive mounds by those southeasterly winds coming off the desert was something that quite spectacular, and it's difficult to get scale on the ground, but yeah, until you get into the air, that's a different story.
One of the highlights to consider doing in Pulu National Park is a helicopter flight. It gives you a drone type effect, much higher though, you're 300 to 500 metres above sea level, and what I love about it is that I can go in with a simple GP lens, a general purpose lens, 24 to 105, 24 to 70, something like that, and get some amazing photographs. So before you fly, I recommend you set your camera up, and it's really simple. Again, aperture priority, I'd suggest 400 ISO, there's lots of light here, an aperture of 5.6, and that should get you about 1,000th of a second shutter speed or a little better. You don't want to be down 500th of a second, that's a bit slow. There is a lot of movement with a helicopter, but around that 1,000th of a second to 2,000th of a second, that's going to give you a lovely sharp image.
The helicopter flight was fantastic because aerial photography gives you such a different perspective of everything when you're up in the air.
You realise after you go up in the helicopter is that it's so much bigger than you ever expected. You sort of think, you see beehives, there's beehives, lots of beehives, but you go up, it's this huge, massive basically, and you can really see how they all started to form.
So as we flew along, we're able to look at gorges that were 300 metres deep, and I enjoyed actually using my zoom lens, 24 and at times to 105, to shoot different facets of it and also to shoot some verticals. So I was doing landscape verticals. Occasionally I noticed my shutter speed did drop, and I increased my ISO or opened my aperture up. That will help freeze the movement and get you those lovely sharp results.
Some of the gorges and things, you just literally had to shoot away, you know. I mean, it's hard because so much is going on and it's pretty buffety. But I'm happy I've got some angles down the gorges. I've got the beehives. As we came back to the airport, the sun was behind us. I've got the long shadows of the trees, which gives you a sense of movement.
Pulu National Park is one of the greatest landscapes on Earth. Why don't you come and explore it?
In the next episode, Darran concludes his Kimberley adventure with a cruise on Lake Argyle. Our next guest is a passionate travel, landscape and portrait photographer. She loves to explore all corners of the globe, to discover beauty in nature and then share it through her amazing photography. This morning we catch up with Steph Vella at Sydney's Northern Beaches. You've been to some amazing locations. Tell me, what are your favourite international locations that you've been to?
It's hard. I've been to some really amazing spots. I've travelled all through the US and there's some amazing places all the way through the desert there, through Utah and Arizona, and such a unique landscape as well, just to experience and to capture. I loved travelling through the Dolomites. I went there in 2019 and all the way through northern Italy, saw these incredible mountain ranges, got to experience summer in Italy where it's like afternoon storms and then crazy light exploding in sunset, and that was incredible. And Iceland as well. Seeing the Northern Lights, once in a lifetime kind of experience. I cried. It was the most amazing thing I've ever seen. So before I got into landscape photography, I was a portrait photographer. I decided to quit my full-time job and go and shoot portraits. And before I started that, I was like, I'm just gonna go on a photography tour of New Zealand just as an in-between. And I absolutely fell in love with landscape photography. We did a workshop and we went to all the iconic spots in New Zealand, the mountain ranges, got to see the Wanaka Tree, Mount Cook, all these amazing spots, and I just absolutely fell in love. But those shots that I took were the first landscape photos I'd ever taken.
It's hard to believe because those New Zealand shots that you've taken on your Instagram are absolutely stunning. You would not think that they are some of the first images.
Definitely a lot of improvement to be done, but that's my favourite thing about photography, is that you can never really master it. You know, every time I go out, I learn something, I can change something, and it just makes me excited to go out the next time too.
Amazing. You're an ambassador for Sarui and Nisi filters. What is it about these products that help your photography?
They're the types of products that help take your photography to the next level. So especially for Nisi filters, it's that product that really helps you get creative with your images. So I can change and control my own shutter speed when it comes to using Nisi filters. So I can slow it down and I can really get the mood in the image that I'm after. So depending if I want to get a nice long exposure and get a nice soft, calm mood in my shot, or if maybe I've got waves crashing at me and I want it to be more of a shorter exposure, the Nisi filters really help me control that, especially with like using a grad filter, so I don't have to expose 2 shots at once. That way I can really just focus on my image. And a sturdy tripod is really one of the most essential things that you can have in your kit as well. Yeah, so I've actually just got my hands on a brand new tripod from a brand called Explorer Photo. It's a bit top secret at the moment. It's not out to the public yet, but it will be soon. The ball head's actually half the weight of a ball head of a similar size, which is really helpful when it comes to travel and landscape photography. It's also carbon fiber and super sturdy, so I was able to get all the shots that I needed throughout the day.
Not only do you take great photos, but you also love to help people with their photography as well.
Yeah, I really have learned to love doing workshops. As I said, the first thing I ever did with landscape photography was I went on a workshop myself, and I really feel like that helped excel me so much quicker in learning photography and learning landscape photography. So I really love helping people, and when people see that moment of the shot that they've taken, that's my favourite thing, seeing the looks on their faces when the images that they're getting. Because it's a very technical subject, photography. There are a lot of little things that all go together. You have to think about the light changing and your shutter speed and your ISO and your aperture, and everything's happening all at once within just a 10-minute period. But once you get the hang of that, everything else is just the fun stuff.
As someone who loves to travel the world, tell me, how have you adapted to the recent border restrictions?
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, it's been pretty tough. Before, when I was traveling, I'd be planning my next trip before I'd even got home from the first one, because that's what I live for, was just traveling around. So it's been tough adjusting to just staying within our restrictions of where we can go, but we live in a beautiful country here in Australia. We have some of the best seascapes, the best places and beaches around, so being able to see those spots and just really appreciating our own country has been good too.
So Steph, you're the co-curator of something called In Focus Women. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So In Focus Women is a group that celebrates and supports females in landscape photography. I really noticed there was a bit of a lack of representation of women in landscape photography, and I wanted to do something about it. There was nothing really out there that was a community for women, so I thought, why not? So we started it, and now we have over 5,500 members. It's growing every single day. We get women from all around the world to share their images. We do Insta meets and we do online meetups, so people from all different time zones can come and join us and meet each other and chat and just support and celebrate women, because there's so many out there shooting, and there's no reason why females can't be just as represented in the industry as males too.
Thank you so much, Steph. Coming up on Snap Happy the Photography Show, Steph is going to give us some tips on long exposure photography.
Hi there, I'm Peter Eastway. We're down here on the New South Wales South Coast, and my job for this season of Snap Happy is to show you my approach to photography, which is capture followed by post-production. You can't do one without the other, and the other, the post-production, is for me an awful lot of fun. Horse's Head is an iconic location for photographers on the New South Wales South Coast. It's just north of Bermagui, which you can see in the background there. And every time I come, it's a little bit different because of the amount of sand on the beach, the tide, and the amount of swell. Today is going to be challenging, let us say, but somehow we're going to get down the bottom there and give it a real good go. So this is why the experts don't come down at high tide, because it's a little bit of a run along there, and you hope the waves don't come up too close. But I think we'll be okay. It's Tim with the camera I'm worried most about. So from here, you can see the shape of the horse's head, and it really is intriguing. The distance depends on the weather and the swell. Today, I'm going to have to stay a fair way back because I don't want to lose my cameras. I'll take my shoes off, and you'll notice we've also put our cameras well above the high tide line, just in case one or two big swells come through. So what I'm doing here is I'm taking a number of shots where the waves are doing different things, so different modes of eruption, different timing, and all that sort of stuff. And then later on, I can put all of those photos together and just brush in the bits of the wave that I like the best. So what I've done is I've moved in closer and closer. I've got the wide view, I liked it, but I'm feeling I've got a crop, and I thought, don't be chicken, Peter, get in a little bit closer, and as long as the waves don't completely wipe me out on my camera, I'm going to be okay. It's still a bit further away than I'd like to be, but let's be realistic about it. Today's not the day to get up too close. In this situation, I'm using manual control. You could use aperture priority or shutter priority, it doesn't really matter. What I'm keeping an eye on is my shutter speed. And I'm having my shutter speed at around 1/8 of a second, because during that 1/8 of a second, the waves move just a little bit while the rocks remain completely stationary. And that's what I like in my photographs. Just a little bit of movement of water and the rocks really strong. The history of photography begins with black and white, with monochrome. And despite the fact we capture so many wonderful colours these days, I love black and white still. In my book, The New Tradition, I start off with black and white 20 years ago in the darkroom, but even today in the digital realm, I'm still shooting black and white from time to time. There's a real emotive quality about it, which I love. And it works well on overcast days when the colour mightn't actually be there. So at Horse's Head yesterday, when we were down at the bottom of the beach, there was some wonderful atmosphere, but the colour wasn't quite there. So my decision was, well, let's switch it to black and white. Going back to my idea of capture followed by post-production, it's a simple matter to turn the image into a black and white. Here in Lightroom, you can see the beginning shot. It's a little bit dull, it's a little bit lackluster. And when we turn it over into black and white, I've squished the image a little bit and I've brought it to life. And that's what you can do in post-production. If you're interested in all the steps I've taken in Lightroom, head over to the Snap Happy website where I go through it step by step. When I look at the end result, that's why I love post-production. What I started with isn't necessarily all that great, but what I finish with is something that I feel very happy with. It's a form of expression, it's part of photography that I really love.
I'm travelling through the East Kimberley, and for the first time I've got the Lumix S5 in my hands. It's a full-frame sensor camera, very compact, and what I love about the camera itself is its simplicity and its layout and how I can handle it and use it to take great images. Let's go further and look into this great camera. It's a 24 megapixel full-frame camera that is well-rounded for both photo and video applications. It actually shares the same sensor as its big brother, the S1, but the big difference with this camera though is the form factor. It's extremely lightweight, compact, and actually measures in smaller than the GH5. The S5 features an LCD flip screen. I love flip screens, and this particular one's really nice because not only can I do a straight horizontal flip, but I can actually turn it around to multiple angles. That is cool for all sorts of photographic situations. The in-body image stabilisation also means that I can confidently shoot handheld in most situations. However, put this camera on a tripod and you can put it into high resolution mode, which is 96 megapixels. It stacks multiple images together. You end up with a huge file that is great for some landscape and other applications like architecture and that sort of work. One of the great features of the S5 Lumix camera is its professional video features. It shares many professional features with the video-centric S1H, such as focus peaking, a histogram, and waveform monitoring. It has dual native ISO, which means that it performs very well in low light situations. It has over 14 stops of dynamic range and records in 10-bit video up to 60 frames per second. It basically means that you have more latitude when it comes to grade your image. When you get a great travel camera like the S5, you need a really good lens to match with that. And what Lumix have done here is created a 20 to 60 millimeter focal range. Now, I've got to say, that's a really cool lens for travel photography. The lens is designed with full weather sealing to cover moisture, dust and freeze situations. And with this body, I think in the field, both of them would handle most situations really well for you. After using the S5 for a week, I've found it a very capable camera. If you're into still and video photography, I think this is one of the great hybrid cameras that's available today. I love its lightweight and its compact nature, and this particular 20 to 60 zoom lens, well, that's a really difficult lens to beat in street photography and general photography. I give it a big tick.
Earlier on the show, we spoke to Steph Vella, an amazing travel and landscape photographer. This morning before dawn, we met up with Steph to watch her in action as she photographed the sunrise on Parramatta Beach. Steph, tell us about this beautiful location. Why did you choose it for today's shoot?
I love rugged seascape shots with all the rocks and the water that can flow through it. It really makes a really interesting image, so this is the perfect spot for that.
Beautiful. Now tell me, is there any special preparation for shooting on the coast?
Safety is the number one thing when it comes to especially seascapes. You really have to be careful of the weather and the waves and the tides. So I always check the tide before coming out on the shoot, make sure it's right for the right location. And whenever you get to the location as well, I always sit and look at the waves for maybe 5 or 10 minutes just to make sure that you don't get some rogue wave coming up or something that could sweep you away, because safety definitely is number one.
What are you looking for in your composition today?
I always kind of try and look for a leading line for my images to bring my viewer all the way through to my subject, as well as the rule of thirds, usually 2/3 of my foreground, 1/3 sky. Unless you get some crazy sky going on, sometimes I'll shoot 2/3 of the sky, but yeah, going by those two rules is the main thing.
What's your technique for using filters?
Filters are a really good way to be able to control your shutter speed within an image. The shutter speed really helps control your mood. So I actually use the Nisi S6 150mm system. It slides onto the front of the lens, and that allows me to use filters on my lens. It has an inbuilt CPL filter, so that way I can polarize my image. It also has 2 slots, so I can stack multiple filters, so I can stack an ND filter as well as a grad filter in my images as well. It's super important to kind of have an entire kit when you're out shooting. This morning when I went down there, obviously it started in low light, so I started out just shooting with a polarizer and a grad filter to help balance the exposure between my sky and my foreground. I started adding filters in, so I started out with a 6-stop just to get that longer exposure in my images as the light was rising. And then once the light was in the sky and the sun had risen, I chucked the 10-stop out, be able to shoot a longer exposure with that again. And then to shoot some shorter flow that I did right at the end, I was using a 3-stop ND filter, which just slowed my shutter down to about half a second, which able to get me those really nice clean lines of the water flowing through the image. When you're using high quality camera equipment, if you then go and put a cheap filter in front of it, you're just ruining your shots. They're going to take away the sharpness of your images. You can also get a color cast in your shots, which is not good. So it's really important to use high quality filters, and that's exactly what Nisi is.
Now tell me, how will you process the final image?
Each image is unique, so I don't have one standard way that I would process every single image, but the majority of them, bring them into Lightroom and kind of do the global adjustments through there. Each image might need something a little bit different depending on the scene, shadows, highlights, contrast, a little bit of vibrance, but I really like to keep the natural essence of a scene when I'm shooting it as well. I don't like to, crazy Photoshop it to what it wasn't, but you are shooting raw when you're out there, so you do need to process your images to bring it back to kind of how you see it in camera as well.
Well, Steph, we were blessed with the most gorgeous morning, and I've got to say that shot around the rocks with that slow shutter speed, that beautiful light coming through has to be my favourite. Thank you so much for sharing your tips with us today. If you want to check out more of Steph's work, head on over to our website. Until then, happy shooting. Thanks for joining us on Snap Happy. If you'd like to join our community, head on over to snaphappytv.com. There you'll find full episodes from the archives, exclusive content, and special offers from our partners. See you next time on Snap Happy, the photography show.